You've probably been scrolling through a dozen welding machines, trying to picture yourself in the shop, wondering if the next thing you click, add to cart, will actually sit on the bench without turning your projects into a mess. That hesitation is real. No one wants to drop a few $1,000s on a unit that looks great on paper, but can't handle the kind of metal you actually work with, whether that's a backyard fence, a small fabrication run, or a full-time production line. I felt that same tug of doubt when I first saw the Cyclone 263Pi, so I dug into the specs, the feature list, and the kind of day-to-day scenarios people in the welding community talk about. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. What sets the Cyclone 263Pi apart is that it's built around a fully digital, inverter-based DC power source that can toggle between MIG, TIG, and stick welding without you having to swap out major components. That kind of flexibility is usually reserved for larger, industrial-grade units, but Everlast has packaged it in a footprint that will still fit on a typical 2x4 shop bench. The first thing I looked at was the 275 amp rating on 240 volts. In practice, that means you can comfortably hit inch-mild steel with a solid bead in MIG mode, and you still have enough headroom for an inch root pass when you drop down to stick or TG. If you've ever tried to thin out a MIG wire to get a tighter bead and found the machine struggling, the single-pulse technology here is designed to smooth that transition, giving a more consistent arc when you're doing short-circuit or spray arc work. For someone who runs a small production shop, the commercial-grade design translates into a few tangible benefits. The panel is laid out so you can pick MIG, TG, or stick with a single press and then dial in the wire feed speed, voltage, and amperage on the same screen. That reduces the chance of missing the machine between jobs, a common source of wasted material and rework. The 30-channel memory function is another practical perk. You can store the exact settings for a specific joint, recall them with a button, and be back welding in seconds. Imagine you're fabricating a batch of metal brackets. You set the machine once, store the profile, and each piece that comes off the press is welded with identical parameters. That kind of repeatability is where the value of the Cyclone really shows up beyond the headline amp rating. On the flip side, the flexibility does come with a learning curve. Because the unit supports both MIG and TG, you'll need to understand the nuances of each process to avoid ending up with a spattered weld when you meant a clean bead. The digital interface is intuitive, but it can be overwhelming for a hobbyist who just wants to plug in a stick electrode and fire away. There's no set-and-forget knob. You have to navigate through a few menus to enable the right mode, select the correct polarity, and adjust the wave form for spray versus short circuit. If you're buying this as your first welder, you might find the time you spend fiddling with settings a bit frustrating compared to a simple, single-process stick machine. Another practical consideration is the power requirement. The 263Pi runs on 240 volts, which is standard for many professional shops, but if you're working out of a home garage with only a 120-volt outlet, you'll need to install a dedicated circuit or use a step-up transformer. That adds extra cost and effort that some buyers overlook until they try to plug the machine in for the first time. In a real-world scenario, I saw a small contractor who had to delay a job because his trailer's inverter couldn't handle the draw, and he ended up hiring an electrician to add a 240-volt line. So, if you don't have easy access to 240-volt power, this welder might not be the most convenient choice. Now, who should walk away from this product? If you're a casual weekend hobbyist who only ever does occasional stick repairs on a pipe or a couple of small projects a month, you'll likely be better served by a more affordable, single-process unit that runs off standard household power. The extra memory slots, multi-process capability, and digital controls will sit idle most of the time, and you'll be paying for features you never use. On the other hand, if you run a small fabrication business, do a lot of automotive framework, or need a machine that can jump between MIG for sheet metal, TG for precise stainless work, and stick for outdoor repairs, the Cyclone 263Pi hits a sweet spot. It gives you the professional-grade versatility without the massive price tag of a dedicated industrial inverter. In terms of weaknesses that matter after you open the box, the unit is on the heavier side. At around 80 pounds, moving it around the shop requires a decent hand truck or a second pair of hands. It's not a deal breaker, but you should factor in the logistics if your workspace is tight or you need to transport the machine to job sites regularly. The other